You are listening to Däs Bundesliga podcast here on the Lock Betting Podcast, where I cover a selection of Bundesliga matches. I've got 6 matches for you this weekend, including the game of the season. Given the state of the table, we have a real title race between Bayern Munich and Borussia Dortmund. And this one is the game of the season, not just because of that, but because of the narrative surrounding it as well. A huge game going down this weekend, no doubt about it for me, that it is the most important game of the season. And before we get to it, we need to cover some other games. So let's begin here with the game between Schalke and Bayer Leverkusen, where Bayer Leverkusen are the 10-11 favourites away from home. It's 3-1 on Schalke, and it's 13-5 here on the draw. Schalke putting a little bit of a run together at the moment and trying to stay in the Bundesliga. And I think they could put themselves in a position to get something here from this game, given they've already got something from the game at home to Borussia Dortmund, who are flying after the Christmas break, and as a result go into this weekend as leaders into the game against Bayern Munich. Leverkusen are a side who have failed to win half of their games when priced up as a favourite this season, so they've let you down as a favourite half the time this season, and they face a Schalke side who have enjoyed their longest unbeaten run since 2017, and it came absolutely out of nowhere with Schalke being unbeaten across their last 8 games. Leverkusen had to settle for a draw in their only away league game against the current side in the bottom 3 so far, and 6 of Schalke's last 8 Bundesliga games have produced under 2.5 goals. And whilst they haven't been setting the world on fire and scoring a ton of goals, because they have been drawing a lot of games during that run, it has been a confidence boosting run that has helped them getting themselves into a position at least to survive, getting themselves in the conversation to survive this season, because before this run they looked absolute certainties to go down. And I'm willing to take them to get something at home to Bayer Leverkusen, who have been one of the most absolute inconsistent teams in Europe so far this season. Up next, we look at the game here between Union Berlin and Stuttgart, where Union Berlin are the 21-20 favourites to pick up the win here, so plus money on them. 11-5 on the draw, and it's 13-5 here on Stuttgart. Union Berlin are fading a little, and as a result of that, they look to be just about clinging on to their Champions League spot. Ultimately, I don't think that they will get that Champions League spot. I do think there are better teams behind them in the chasing pack, and they will fall away. But this is a game that I do expect Union Berlin to win. Union Berlin have lost just one of their last 10 Bundesliga matches, although, as I said, they have dipped, so they have been drawing games. Stuttgart have won just one of their last 11 league games and have conceded at least twice in 9 of the last 10 Bundesliga away outings. So, given Union Berlin have been so strong at home this season and Stuttgart travel poorly, this is an opportunity to Union Berlin to turn some of those draws into wins and get their top 4 campaign going again. Another team going for the top 4 is RB Leipzig. They will be at home to Mons tomorrow, where RB Leipzig are the 4-7 favourites. It's 10-3 on the draw, and it's 9-2 here on Mons. RB Leipzig are somewhat of an automatic on their own patch, particularly against teams below them in the table. There is some data here that Mons could contribute towards the scoring, as they have failed to score in just one of their last 13 away games. But ultimately, I'll go with RB Leipzig to get it done and to get us away from this particular price, because obviously we don't pick games here on this show at 1-2 minus 200, but to get us to around about 4-6 minus 150, we'll tackle the over 1.5 goals. As I said, Mons may put RB Leipzig in a position where they need to score 2, given that they have failed to score just in one of their last 13 away games. But I think that Leipzig will be able to get those 2 goals and maybe even more, with 8 of the last 10 home games featuring at least 3 goals, and with Leipzig winning 9 of the last 11 Bundesliga matches at home. Hasn't been a great season for Leipzig so far. They are still in the top 4 hunt, and that is largely down to their home form, and I look for them to continue winning at home here in this one. Up next, we move on to the game that I talked about right at the top of the show. It is the game of the week as Bayern Munich host Borussia Dortmund. This is known in Germany as the Klassiker, and it will be Thomas Tuchel's first game in charge. Thomas Tuchel is the former manager of Paris Saint-Germain, of Chelsea, and he's the former manager of Borussia Dortmund. This is an absolute crazy start for him. It was crazy that Nagelsmann got fired anyway. I'm not sure if that was just with the game against Manchester City in mind, whether it was a case of the board were happy that there was actually a title race this season and that Bayern Munich should be well ahead automatically by this time of the season, or maybe some of the crazy reports that the players didn't like Nagelsmann, they didn't like how he tried to steal the attention, they didn't like how he dressed, they didn't like his methods. So there's lots of conflicting reports, but ultimately it has resulted in Tuchel being here and Nagelsmann not being here. Bayern are the 1-2 favourites to win the game. It's 4-1 on the draw, and it's 21-4 here on Dortmund. I don't think there's any way that Bayern Munich win this game by a 1-0 scoreline. I do think Bayern Munich will win this game because they just have a way of beating Dortmund every time they play them, whether it be just an irrelevant game or whether it be something like this, which is actually a 6-pointer as Dortmund come into it top. And if they can avoid a defeat, they really put themselves in a good position to continue challenging for the league. If they can win, then suddenly I would say that Borussia Dortmund become the favourites to see it out this season, as they will establish a 4-point lead and hand Thomas Tuchel a losing start as the Bayern manager. I don't see any of that happening. I see 2 things here. I see goals and I see Bayern Munich winning the game. So I'm going to do what I did for the game that we just covered with Leipzig, and I'm going to do the same. Take Bayern Munich to win, and I'm going to tack on over 1.5 goals here, although I am expecting far more. That brings it up to 4-6 minus 150, just like it did in the last game. There have only been 5 goalless draws in 107 meetings between these 2 teams, with those games averaging over 3 goals per match. Bayern Munich have won each of the last home league head-to-heads with Borussia Dortmund, and Thomas Tuchel has definitely inherited enough quality to win this game. But as I said, we'll tack on the over 1.5 as 4 of both Bayern and Dortmund's last 5 league matches have seen over 2.5 goals, with both teams scoring in those as well. 3.23 average goals have been scored across 107 Bundesliga matches featuring Borussia Dortmund and Bayern Munich in the Klassikers. And for that reason, I think there's enough data there for me to take Bayern Munich to continue winning and to tack on the over 1.5 goals, giving us 4-6 minus 150 here in this one. We move across to the 2 games on Sunday there, after just covering the main event from this weekend. We look at the game between Cologne and Borussia Mönchengladbach, where Borussia Mönchengladbach are the 2-1 dogs. It's 12-5 the draw, and Cologne are the 6-5 home favourites. Cologne still needing to make sure they are getting out of the relegation zone this season, and I think they'll obviously put a big effort up here at home in front of their own supporters. I think when teams get themselves on the beach, they usually drift off away from home first, whilst they probably play well at home until the final 4 or 5 games of the season, when it's clear you're not getting in the European places, but you're also not getting relegated, so you can relax, you can take your holiday early. But I think at this point of the season it's too early, and I also don't think that Cologne are going to rest at home. As for Borussia Mönchengladbach, I don't trust them to win away from home, but at the same time they are the better team here, so I don't trust Cologne to beat them. So difficult game to handicap. I've ultimately landed on goals, over 2.5 goals and and both teams to score are too juiced individually. But if you put them together, you do end up with a price of 11 to 10. It's a pick that has won in 6 of the last 7 head-to-head encounters between the two teams, so their matches do usually produce goals. Both sides are out of form going into this one, but they'll both fancy their chances of beating each other. A Bundesliga high 18 of Gladbach's games this season have produced over 2.5 goals. Cologne have conceded 8 times across their last 2 games. But as I said, the standout piece of data here is the fact that 6 of the last 7 head-to-head encounters have seen over 2.5 goals, with both teams scoring in those 6 out of 7 matches. So we will go for that as our main pick. We will go for both teams to score along with the over 2.5 goals here, and you pair those together, you get plus money at the price of 11 to 10 here for this one. The final game that we look at here is the 4:30 kickoff on Sunday. It's between Werder Bremen and Hoffenheim, where Werder Bremen are 13 to 10 favourites. It's 12 to 5 on the draw, and it's 15 to 8 here on Hoffenheim. This is a game where we essentially just do the same thing that we did in the last game. So your Sunday special is going to be to take 2 games that feature goals with over 2.5 goals, along with BTTS, your selection with both, and that's available at 11 to 10 in both of the games. We take it here because Werder Bremen's home games have just delivered goals this season. Werder themselves have scored more goals in 2 teams who are actually in the top 4 this season, but they've failed to keep a clean sheet in 11 of their 13 home league games. Werder Bremen actually post a 10-point cushion from the drop zone, so they can continue to play free-flowing football. They've done that all season. As I said, they've scored more goals in 2 of the teams inside the top 4. As for Hoffenheim, they picked up points in their last game with a win over Hertha. And that was more points than he picked up in the previous 14 games prior to that, with 2 draws and 12 losses. This is the kind of form that has put them into relegation danger. So this is a game here where they'll be looking to build on what they did last time. I'm not sure they can do that, but I know there'll be goals here along the way, given that Werder Bremen are an entertaining side. But whilst trying to be entertaining, they're conceding goals and conceding an average of 1.9 goals per league game this season. So that's enough data for me to think that Hoffenheim can make their contribution towards the game, whilst Werder Bremen, as I said, have only been outscored by 2 teams in the top 4. So they've scored enough goals to be in the top 4. They just can't defend, and therefore our selection is the one that makes sense here for this one. Closing out with your lock on the show. Lots of different things I liked here on the show, but one pick in particular stood out as the lock. One pick seemed like the biggest certainty, and one pick comes from a game which I think everybody will be fascinated to watch tomorrow. So it comes, of course, from the game between Bayern Munich and Borussia Dortmund, and we are going to take Bayern Munich to continue their dominance over Borussia Dortmund, and we are going to get ourselves away from the 1 to 2 minus 200 line by tacking on just over 1.5 goals, and that gets us from 1 to 2 minus 200 to 4 to 6 minus 150. Just do not see a way how Bayern Munich win this game 1-0, but ultimately I also don't see a way how Borussia Dortmund get anything from this game. Bayern Munich just absolutely own this team, particularly at home, which is where this one's being played. And at home against Borussia Dortmund, Bayern Munich have turned up and won 8 straight games. So I see no reason to oppose them here, as we take Bayern Munich to make it 9 in a row, and we tackle on the over 1.5 goals to give us a lock at 4 to 6 minus 150. That's it for me. Good luck with all your bets as always, and thanks for listening.